Hi everyone, Mike Malatesta here, and welcome back to the How Did It Happen podcast. On this podcast, I dig in deep with every guest to explore the roots of their success, to discover not just how it happened, but why it matters. My mission is to find and share stories that inspire, activate, and maximize the greatness in you. Hey everybody, welcome back to the How Did It Happen podcast. I'm Mike, and thank you so much for being here today. I've got a very special episode for you. It is with heavy hearts that we bring you a recording featuring the late Dr. Mark Goulston, a renowned psychologist, author, and a dear friend to many in the field. Mark died on December 31st due to an unforeseen infection during recovery from a bone marrow transplant. Mark's wisdom, compassion, and contributions to the field of psychology have left a lasting impact on all who had the privilege of knowing him or learning from his work, which includes me, having had him on the podcast and me being on his as well. While he may no longer be with us in person, his insights and teachings continue to resonate and inspire. So in this episode, we're revisiting a recording from a previous interview with Dr. Goulston that originally dropped on September 26, 2022. If you heard it then, I think it'll be worth listening to again. And if you didn't, well, there you go. We get a chance to listen to Dr. Goulston and I have a great conversation as well. It remains as relevant and as valuable as ever in my mind. And we hope that by sharing his thoughts and expertise once more, we can honor his memory and continue to benefit from his incredible legacy.
What I realize is my whole life, I've used the Michelangelo mindset. One of the things that Michelangelo famously said is, I saw the angel in the marble and I carved to set it free. You know, if you're a leader, inside your people is a hunger, not just a desire, but a hunger to trust you, have confidence in you, respect you, admire you, feel safe with you, like you, be inspired by you. And what you need to do to set it free is to be trustworthy. You're respected because you stand up for things and you stand up to people who violate those values.
This episode is sponsored by The Dream Exit. The Dream Exit is a private, bespoke program for successful entrepreneurs with annual revenue between $5 million and $100 million who realize that they have one chance to get their dream exit right, and that the odds of realizing that dream by themselves, all alone, or at the last minute are stacked against them. In less than 90 days, we teach you how to design, build, and execute a customized dream exit playbook that gets your business ready for sale at its maximum value and gets you ready to maximize your meaning and purpose in your post-exit life, even if today you are not ready to sell. You see, dream exits just don't happen. They are the result of early, professional, and proven planning. So if you're an entrepreneur with annual sales between 5 and 100 million, and you want to learn how to 10x to 100x your chances of achieving the dream exit you deserve, go to dreamexitplaybook.com today. So let's dive into this timeless conversation with the late Dr. Mark Goulston.
Before I tell you all about my guest, Dr. Mark Goulston, I feel like I need to tell him something first. So I was fortunate to be on his podcast.
My wake-up call.
My wake-up call, which I keep forgetting, my wake-up call, episode number 324. And I've been on a lot of podcasts, and I was introduced to Mark from my publisher. I think that's how that happened, Scribe Media. And I did his show, and I was just I'd never heard of Mark, and I was so taken away by the empathy that this guy has. Like, he had so much empathy for me, a person he didn't even know, had just met, and was talking to for the very first time. And so that could have been just it. I just did the show and I've been like, oh, okay, but I started listening and sort of investigating Mark after, which I don't do with many podcasters either. And as I've been listening to his podcast, I've just been blown away by how he can connect. And I think you use the term sometimes, Mark, to get people to surrender to you, because he's got this empathetic, disarming, but at the same time, very engaging and inquisitive way about him. So I just wanted to say that to you, Mark, and to my audience first, before I say more about you and your show, and before we get into this. So thank you for that gift. So let me tell you a little bit more about Mark. So Dr. Mark Goulston is a Marshall Goldsmith 100 Coaches member who coaches entrepreneurs, CEOs, chairs, and managing directors to become the best version of themselves. He's also an international keynote speaker, helping audiences do the same, and a contributor to some of the most important publications out there, like Harvard Business Review, Business Insider, Wall Street Journal, New York Times. You get the picture. Originally a UCLA professor of psychiatry for over 25 years, and from what I understand from listening to Mark's story, it was quite a trip for him to even get there. And a former FBI hostage negotiation trainer, sort of like Chris Voss, I always think of when I hear that thing. He's probably the most person that identifies as that most in the media, at least. Mark's expertise has been forged and proven in the crucible of real life, high stakes situations. He is the author or co-author of 9 books, and his book, Just Listen, has been translated into 28 languages and become the top book on listening in the world. He hosts a highly rated podcast, as I mentioned, called My Wake Up Call. And fun fact, if I have my facts straight, parts of the movie Superbad, starring Jonah Hill, Seth Rogen, Michael Cera, Emma Stone, and Bill Hader, were filmed at Mark's home. Do I have that right, Mark?
That's what makes me memorable to millennials.
Okay.
Forget about the FBI. Forget about being a shrink. Forget about all that stuff. When I say they filmed Superbad in my home, they go, "Oh my God, really?" Amazing.
Well, we may touch on that just a little bit, if you don't mind. You can find Mark all over the place. His website is his name, right? Mark Goulston, is that it? .com. LinkedIn, Facebook is Dr. Mark Goulston. Instagram, Mark Goulston. TikTok, Dr. MARKG, at Dr. MARKG. And if you Google him, you'll find out a ton more. You'll see his TEDx talk, a lot of his talks. He's everywhere. And today he's here. So Mark, thank you for joining me on the show. I start every podcast with the same simple question, and that is, how did it happen for you?
Well, I've had a long and winding road journey. I'm in my early 70s. I started out as a medical doctor, then a psychiatrist. Then I expanded, as you mentioned, to hostage negotiation training, then to coaching and executive coaching, high stakes negotiation. Something you didn't mention, probably because we haven't really promoted it. I have a website with my partner called Michelangelo Mindset. And we may do something with it, but I want to share it with you and your viewers and listeners, because what I realize is my whole life, I've used the Michelangelo mindset. And if you want to be a successful entrepreneur, if you want to be a successful CEO, if you want to be a successful salesperson, if you want to be a successful husband or wife or mother or father, I think you may adopt it also, because one of the things that Michelangelo famously said is, "I saw the angel in the marble and I carved to set it free." In fact, there's an article, if you go to Real Leaders, Michelangelo Leadership, it's an article where I said, if you're a leader, inside your people is a hunger, not just a desire, but a hunger to trust you, have confidence in you, respect you, admire you, feel safe with you, like you, be inspired by you. And what you need to do to set it free is to be trustworthy. Don't lie. Instill confidence, have a track record of actually getting stuff done. Cause them to feel psychologically safe, which means that you eliminate bullies and toxic personalities. And when there's a crisis, you take charge of the situation. And then when the crisis passes, you are more consensus building. You're respected because you stand up for things, and you stand up to people who violate those values. If you're a salesperson, inside every customer you're having a meeting with is someone who wants to buy something from you. Every 3 months, I give a 6-month presentation to an accelerator called Expert Dojo. And it's usually about 20, it's a cohort of about 20 startups. And they're early stage, so they've exhausted friends and family, and now they're looking for investor money. And one of the things I present to them, which they seem to like, is I said, inside investors is a desire to give you money. In fact, you're doing them a favor.
Sure.
Because they can't sit on their money, they have to invest it. And one of the things that I share with them, which they're always looking for because they've heard about it. If you're a startup or an early stage company and you're talking to investors, and after 3 minutes of your presentation, they smile, that's not a yes. Investors don't smile. It's about money. If they're smiling 3 minutes into your 20-minute presentation, it's because they've already decided it's a no, but you put so much work into that presentation, and they don't want to be rude and say, I've heard enough, done, goodbye, pass. So they smile because they don't want you to catch them wanting to be rude.
Yeah.
So what I suggest to people, now, if your experience is that the smile does lead to them throwing money at you and wanting to give you more than you asked for, well, then this wouldn't apply. But if you've had that experience where 3 to 4 minutes into a 20-minute presentation, they're smiling, it's because they've already decided it's a no. And if your experience tells you, here's the Michelangelo part of that, inside they want to give you money. So here's what you do. And here's the exact script. When they smile, whatever you're saying, whatever slide you're on, you pause and you say, can we stop for a moment? They're going to get nervous because you're on to them.
You're going to call them out. Yeah.
You caught them not wanting to be rude, and they're going to
Sure.
go, ha. And then what you say is you say, when we started the presentation, you were listening for something and you didn't hear it. In fact, I'm guessing we're even further away from it than when we started. Can you tell me what you were listening for specifically? Because we actually might have it. We just didn't put it in the presentation because, we put the deck together wrong. But if we have it, what you're listening for, looking for, maybe this could be a workout for both of us.
Mm-hmm.
And then what you say, this is what we say in the accelerator, is you can say, I'll tell you, even if we don't have it, I'm in a cohort of 20 companies. We know each other. We support each other. I might be able to come up with 2 or 3 introductions, and then you and they can go, on your merry way. You give them money, they succeed. And so what's happened is by using the Michelangelo selling or pitching inside them as a desire to give you money, you just need to surface what they were looking for and listening for. And then if you pivot away from anything that makes you money to introducing them to other startups, those startups are going to be grateful to you. That person who was all set to say goodbye is going to be grateful to you. And you have the possibility of building a relationship. as opposed to they're smiling at 3 minutes and then they allow you to go the 20 minutes and they say something polite and they say, well, send me something, but they're gone. But can you see how if you take this approach, so I'll share something else with you. If you're an entrepreneur and a CEO, many times entrepreneurial energy, CEO energy is really alpha. It's very alpha energy. It runs on dopamine. You tend to be momentum junkies.
Mm-hmm.
Frequently, that doesn't play well in your personal relationships. And a lot of times what will happen is you will rush your partner who may want an emotional connection with you, and you try to push it into a problem or give them advice that they don't want.
Yeah, you're trying to solve a problem that may not exist, in other words.
Right. So let me give you some insight that I hope will grab your attention if you're in a relationship with someone who doesn't have that alpha energy. And I'm not being sexist, because I've run into alpha female entrepreneurs whose husbands are the ones who tend to be the more softer and more emotional and more connecting type. So this is not, in this day and age, this can apply to you whether you're a male or a female or LGBTQ entrepreneur. So if you've had one of those conversations that goes sideways with your partner, one of the reasons they're listening for a way to connect with you emotionally is frequently they're a little bit frustrated with people in your family, like your young kids. And they're losing their patience with your young kids. And they want to pivot and displace their frustration onto you so that they don't yell at your young kids. And then have them question themselves. Oh, am I a terrible mom? Am I a terrible dad? And so what they're really wanting is not for you to give them advice or solutions, but you want to, this is dating me, but you want to do a Muhammad Ali rope-a-dope. So Muhammad Ali beat George Foreman by just allowing George Foreman to punch himself up. So what you want to do in an intimate relationship is not give them solutions, but get them to talk even more. And for those of you who like tactics, one of the things you can say to your partner is, in a calmer moment, is to say, when we have conversations, do you want me to give you advice, or do you want me to just be aware of what's going on? Because if you just want me to be aware, it'll take the pressure off me in having to come up with a solution when you don't want one. And then I get my feelings hurt because I give you this great advice and you don't want it. If you just want me to be aware, then I'll just try to keep you talking till you get it off your chest. Or if you want me to give you advice, I'll be happy to do that.
Yeah, very smart.
Yeah.
Well, in both of those cases, Mark, with that one and with the VCs, it seemed like you were inviting permission for the other person to express what they're looking for from you. Did I sense that right?
Absolutely. In fact, if you're game, and we've already gotten to know each other because you are on my podcast, I'm going to right here and now give you the difference using you, the difference between you listening to me and you're listening for something.
Okay.
So
let's do it.
Yeah. And I want you to share with me if you feel a shift inside you. So right now you're listening to me, you're talking to me. You're checking boxes, you're following up with what I'm saying, and you're building on it. And we're having, I think, a very pleasant, mutually respectful, I'm talking to you, you're listening to me. But if I were to drill inside what you're listening for, underneath you listening to me, I think what you're listening for, try this on, is you're listening for me to give information that is immediately usable and valuable to your listeners and viewers, because your listeners and viewers trust you and have confidence in you. And you want to honor their trust and confidence in you by your bringing them value that's relevant to their lives that they can use. And you may also be listening for, which isn't the case with me because we've already had a previous interview, but you may be listening for maybe a best-selling author who's awful, who's terrible, and you have to go back because you have to protect your audience from them. And afterwards you can say, geez, congratulations on you being on the Wall Street bestseller list, but we can't use the podcast because they were terrible. So now to viewers and listeners, he is laughing because he knows exactly what I'm saying. And so can you feel that that's right, that you're listening for a way to not waste your listeners or viewers' time?
Hey, everybody, just a quick pause here to let you know how much I appreciate that you've made time for my podcast. If you're not already a subscriber, please become one today. Leave a review and tell a friend. Now, let's get back to the show.
As you were saying that, I thought that was very artful, by the way. You had a lot of, your intonation, your facial expression, everything was sort of convincing me about what you were saying. But I think the thing that I was listening for, and I think you were delivering it as well, was I want my audience to have a connection with you. Like, I want them to not only have something they can take away, but say, I want more of that. And the reasons they may want more could be different for every person or a lot of people. But that's what I really am looking for. Like, how do I connect you to them, to their life experience? How do I get them? How can I be successful inviting their permission to connect with you through the conversation that we're having?
Yes, so you're not just wanting to honor your listeners and viewers, you're wanting to honor your guests giving you their time.
Yeah.
And you want it to be valuable not just to your viewers and listeners, but to your guests.
Right.
And if you can connect them to each other, then you feel you've satisfied what you're trying to do.
Yeah. So let's build on that connection thing a little bit, Mark, if you don't mind. Let's. I mentioned this sort of road you had, to get to becoming a psychiatrist, and as I recall, you had several stints in medical school. You were the benefactor of someone's kindness, and I'm interested in having you share that young experience, you as a young person, to how you got to there and why.
Okay, well, Mike, at the risk of alienating your alpha momentum-driven listeners, one of my greatest accomplishments, and I've had a long life and I've accomplished a bunch, but something that I've accomplished that I don't know of anyone else who has, is I dropped out of medical school twice and finished. I don't know anyone who dropped out of medical school twice and finished. And I didn't drop out to see the world and to go, be a stand-up comedian. I think I had untreated depression. So what happened is I reached a certain point in medical school, dropped out. They allow you to drop out. A lot of people take a year off because they're stressed out. And I worked in blue collar jobs, which to this day I love. I mean, they were so simple. I would just go, put in my time. I'm done at 5. I romanticize those blue collar jobs.
What were they, Mark? What were the jobs?
Well, my favorite one was I worked for a liquor distributing company, and I put up displays in liquor stores and put up Heineken windmills and bars.
Mm.
So I'd be climbing up these rickety ladders, seeing dead rat skeletons on the top of a bar in South Boston. And I loved it. I mean, I would be talking to the barkeep. I'd be talking to the customers. I loved it. And then I'd learn negotiating, because I would say, okay, if you keep this neon sign up in your bar for a month, I'll give you a second one to put in your basement. Because a lot of these people who own these stores and bars, I worry that they're going to get some kind of cancer. You go into their basement, you can't see yourself. They have 93 lights and displays and things. So you'd be bartering with them, and
Yeah. Okay.
and so I love that. And then I came back, and my mind went back to where it was in 6 months. So I asked for another leave of absence, but this time, what I didn't realize is that schools, medical schools, I don't know if it's true of law schools, but they lose matching funds when you take a leave of absence. Tuition doesn't cover the cost of educating you. So I met with the head of the school, and he cared about funds. And I don't even remember the meeting with him, but I got a call from the dean of students who cared about students. And I was at a low point. And I come from a background where, my dad was a product of the Depression, and you're only worth what you do. If you can't do anything, you're not worth much.
Yeah.
And so the dean calls me in, dean of students. He says, I have a letter from the main dean, read it. And the letter said, I met with Mr. Goulston. We talked about alternate careers. I'm advising the promotions committee that he be asked to withdraw. I said, what does this mean? The dean of students said, you've been kicked out. And it was my good fortune. I don't really believe in miracles, but something miraculous happened. When he said that, I felt it was like a gunshot wound. I kind of folded over. My cheekbones were wet, and I thought I was bleeding. I kept looking at my fingers like I was bleeding from my eyes, and it was tears. And so imagine hearing this. And this is probably why I went on to become a suicide prevention expert. So you feel you're kind of useless and you're about to be thrown away. And this is what the dean of students said to me. He said, Mark, you didn't mess up because you're passing everything, but you are messed up. But if you became unmessed up, I think this school would be glad they gave you a second chance. So at that point, I just started crying because he was pummeling me with compassion. And then he hit me with the trifecta, which is what I used with suicidal patients for 25 years, and none of them died by suicide. And the trifecta is he saw value in me just for me. He saw a future for me. And he was willing to stand up to the medical school, stand up against them. And he said, Mark, even if you don't become unmessed up, even if you don't become a doctor, even if you don't do anything with the rest of your life, I'd be proud to know you. So he hit me with that, and I just started sobbing. And then he said, I'd be proud to know you because you have something that the world needs. And we don't grade it in medical school. But you won't know how much the world needs it till you're 35, but you've got to make it till you're 35, and you deserve to be on this planet, and you're going to let me help you. So the trifecta was he saw that I had something of value in me, that I had a future, and he stood up to the medical school and say, we're going to give this one a second chance. So I took a year off. I grew up in Boston, went to med school in Boston, went to undergraduate school at UC Berkeley. And during that time off, I went to Topeka, Kansas, your neck of the woods, a little south of you. And I went to a place called the Menninger Foundation, which is a big psychiatric institute. It's now, I think, based in Houston. And I guess what he saw was there because I was able to get through to schizophrenic farm boys when I grew up in a suburb of Boston. So knowing that I had some kind of knack, allowed me to take that time off. I went back, finished med school, went to UCLA, finished psychiatry training there. And then I went out, and a big part of my practice was suicide prevention. And I just paid it forward. People would come to me and I would see something worthwhile in them that they didn't have to do anything for. I could see a future for them that they couldn't see. And I grabbed them by the nape of the neck psychologically and said, "You're not going anywhere."
And so this 25 years, not a single patient died of suicide, although they were all at least in some way suicidal when they came to talk to you. What was the conversation, Mark? I mean, what was the path? I mean, we had talked earlier about this ability that you have, and I've heard you talk about this, to have people surrender to you. Was it just about having, I mean, I know there was a lot of clinical stuff in it that maybe I won't get, but I'm just wondering, what was the secret?
Well, I think the secret, now you have to realize this is the secret of me as a practicing psychiatrist who did psychotherapy instead of medication, is when people came in, one of the great good fortune of my career is that when I finished training, a fellowship I was supposed to go into got canceled. So I said to myself, "Well, I'll just go out there, see if anyone comes to me." And one of my mentors was one of the leading pioneers in suicide prevention. So he's the one who kept referring me people. And because I didn't work in an institution, I didn't have to check boxes. And when I would sit with people who were suicidal, I'd pick up in their eyes that they were screaming at me in their eyes, even though they looked kind of almost like numb.
Mm-hmm.
What they were screaming at me is, "You're checking boxes and I'm running out of time." So I threw away the boxes. And so what I listened for entirely was, where's the hurt, the fear, the anger, and how much time do we have before they do something destructive? It's the only thing I listened for. In fact, I listened for it so deeply. Sometimes I didn't know what race or gender they were. I remember I was seeing an African-American patient, and 6 months into seeing him, I must have said something kind of weird. He said, Mark, Dr. Goulston, I'm Black." I didn't know he was Black. Do you follow me? Because when he got in the room, the hurt, the fear, the anger, and running out of time before he did something was so powerful. And what happens, and I will tell you this to you, in your personal relationships, okay, so this may not help you as an entrepreneur, but it'll make your life better. In your personal relationships, especially in this time of the pandemic, almost everyone you know has a lot of hurt, fear, and anger. And when people pick up that you're listening for it, and I co-authored a book, my 8th book during the pandemic, and it's called Why Cope When You Can Heal. And I introduced a name for this approach called surgical empathy. And why surgical empathy? Because if you've never been suicidal, you won't understand what I'm about to say. But if you have been, you'll say, he's right on. When we're traumatized in life, in order to cope with it, we don't form psychological attachments. We form psychological adhesions. It's like when you have surgery to save your life, your organs will often develop adhesions. And if the adhesions are strangulating some of your organs, you have to go in surgically and cut the adhesions. So surgical empathy is a way to go into the psychological adhesion to death as the only way to take away the pain of hopelessness, helplessness, worthlessness.
And is that adhesion thing? Is that like a defense mechanism? That's sort of like,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
okay.
I mean, if you think, look, if you've ever taken a lifesaver training at the beach or the pool, one of the things they train you on is how to safely hold on to a drowning person without that drowning person bringing you both down.
Right.
So they're not attaching to you in a rational way saying, oh, thank you, Mr. or Ms. Lifeguard, for they're grabbing onto you. It's an adhesion. But surgical empathy cuts through it. Actually, I'll share an anecdote because you seem to be giving me a lot of time, and by this time we've probably scared away the entrepreneurs who aren't into this, but you're into it, I can tell.
Yep.
So there was one woman I was seeing that was referred to me by this Dr. Schneidman, who Ed Schneidman is a pioneer in suicide prevention. We'll call her Nancy. She'd made several suicide attempts, and I didn't think I was helping her. And way back then, you could be in the hospital for 4, 5, 6 weeks. It's not like that anymore. And so she'd been in the hospital multiple times and made 3 suicide attempts. And I was seeing her, but she never made really eye contact. And I didn't think I was helping her. And I was seeing her probably about 6 months, a couple times a week, maybe more. And I used to moonlight once a month, which means I would go into a state psychiatric hospital and cover for the psychiatrist there on the weekend. And sometimes you don't sleep for 24 hours or 30 hours. So there I am seeing Nancy on a Monday, and I hadn't slept, and she didn't make eye contact with me. And as I'm seated with her, I'm looking out at the room, and the color turns to black and white. And then the black and white turns to I get the chills, and I think I'm having a stroke or a seizure. So I'm a medical doctor. So I did a neurologic exam on myself. I'm tapping my knees, I'm tapping my elbows, I'm looking at my finger to see if I'm seeing double. And it wasn't rude because she didn't look at me. And everything was there. I said, no stroke, no seizure. And then I had this crazy idea that I was looking out at the world, feeling what she felt, that it was black and white and cold. So because I was sleep deprived, I leaned in and it got worse. And then I blurted something out that normally I wouldn't have said. And I said, Nancy, I didn't know it was so bad. And I can't help you kill yourself. But if you do, I will still think well of you. I'll miss you. And maybe I'll understand why you had to get out of the pain. And I thought to myself, did I think that or did I say that? And then I thought, I think I just gave her permission. And that was the first time she looked at me. And I thought she was going to say, thank you for understanding. I'm overdue. And I said, Nancy, what are you thinking? And she looked at me and she held onto my eyes like I'm holding onto yours. And she said, if you can really understand why I might have to kill myself to get out of the pain, maybe I won't need to. And then she smiled. And then I grabbed onto her eyes because this was the first time we made eye contact. And I said, I'll tell you what we're going to do. I'm not going to give you any treatments that you've already been through that really didn't work unless you ask for them. Would that be okay? And she smiled as if to say, keep talking. And then I leaned in and grabbed onto her eyes. And I said, what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to find you wherever you are. And I'm going to keep you company there as long as it takes, because I don't want you to be alone there anymore. Would that be okay? And then her eyes started to water a little bit, kind of like what happened with me and the dean of students. But could you track with that, Mike?
Yeah. And then what? What happened then?
Well, we turned a corner because she
Yeah.
felt less alone in hell. After Anthony Bourdain and Kate Spade died by suicide, and this it was within the same week, I wrote an article, you can find it, Why People Kill Themselves. It's Not Depression. And what I talked about is that there's hundreds of millions of people who are depressed who don't kill themselves. There's people who lose their job or their marriage and they don't kill themselves. It contributes to it. But one of the things I recognize that nearly all suicidal people feel at the end is they feel despair. And if you break the word despair into DESPAIR, it means unpaired, hopeless, unpaired with a future, helpless, powerless, useless, worthless, purposeless, meaningless. And when they all line up, pointless. And they pair with death to take the pain away. It's like the sirens calling out to the sailors, come crash on the rocks, I'll take your pain away. And so they pair with death to take the pain away. But if they can feel felt by you, which is what Nancy felt, they'll pair with that.
Just a short break here to ask you a question. Have you read my book? It's called Ownership: How Getting Selfish Got Me Unstuck, and it's available on Amazon, Audible, and everywhere else. If you're looking for inspiration that will help you unlock your greatness and potential, order or download your very own copy today.
And let go of this being suicidal. I'll share another insight that was kind of...
Can I ask a question first, Mark?
Sure.
You said during that conversation you had with Nancy twice, you said, would it be okay? And then you proceeded to. So getting back to like what's important for entrepreneurs, I thought that was very, like, asking for permission. Would it be okay to whatever follows is a very powerful strategy, right? Because when you say, would it be okay? You're giving someone the chance to say, no, it would not be okay, in which case they weren't going to be receptive to whatever you were going to say otherwise. Does that make sense? Is that what's happening?
It not only makes sense, but if you're listening in to the few entrepreneurs that listen through all those stories, I got Mike's attention. He's thinking, you got my attention, Mark. Why you might want to say, would it be okay? And this is a problem that a lot of entrepreneurs do. Entrepreneurs are often too convincing too soon. And what I coach them on is you want to be compelling to open people's minds, convincing to get them to take action. And why you might want to ask permission is because you want to give them the chance to choose to do something with you. Whereas what I see with a lot of tech entrepreneurs is they're so enamored with their IP and their technology, they come off as convincing too soon, which can take away the space between you and your customer or investor, and you take away their choosing to want to give you their money. So when you say, would it be okay? You're respecting them making the choice,
right,
to want to engage with you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you for clarifying that. That's good. Do you mind if I shift it a little bit?
It's your podcast, man.
You mentioned, are you a YPO member? I see it on your website. I don't know if you...
It's interesting. A friend of mine, Jason Reed, serial entrepreneur, his 14-year-old son died by suicide 3 years ago. He reached out to me, and we've been doing presentations. We did 2 YPO global presentations where he talks about the signs that he missed with his son.
Okay.
How he blames himself. And then I come in and talk about, if you're worried about your teenager, this is how to open up. And we've done presentations, the EO, both in person and on virtually. So yeah, yes.
I asked because, well, I saw it on your website, but then I also, I heard you at one time mention Andre Norman. And for those of you who don't know who Andre Norman is, he is a gentleman who was heavily involved in gangs, went to prison, killed multiple people, killed people in jail, but ended up, having an epiphany of sorts and actually got a degree from Harvard, some sort of degree from Harvard afterwards. And now he goes around, and I actually accompanied him for 2 days here in Milwaukee when he came here for YPO. And I took him to 3 schools because he likes to, whole thing is when he goes to a community, he wants to talk to kids in high school. And he's become, I'd say very popular. I don't know if that's how you ran into him, Mark, but anyway, look up Andre Norman. He's got a tremendous story. And for, it's kind of, you pick up a guy at the airport who, has had the history he's had, and you're a little kind of worried. But boy, oh boy, I had a great time. I spent a lot of time with him, driving him around and then hosting him at the events. And as I said, we went to 3 schools, and I just sat there and saw the kids interact with him. And what was so cool about it is when, kids are like, whatever. They don't want to interact with him. They think they know it all still. And he calls them on that, right? Just very, very plain spokenly to try to get them to listen. Because listening to him is going to be a net positive for their futures, some of them, or maybe a lot of them. So anyway, I remember hearing you talk about him. I don't know how you connected with him, but do you remember?
He and I have become partners and like brothers. So,
okay.
So he was on my podcast, Andre Norman.
Yeah.
And I had the same feeling about him that you did. And so I've been introducing him to the Fortune 500. Mm. So someone else who was on my podcast was Doug Conant. He was the CEO of Campbell's Soup. He's also the chair of chief executive for corporate purpose. And these are the 250 top CEOs of the top 250 companies. And it's their social philanthropy. And so I introduced Andre to Doug. Andre did a town hall meeting with Doug. And in May of this year, he went to New York and he did a presentation to, the Fortune 500 companies, to their social responsibility people, because he's for real. He doesn't come off, as he said to me, and he said this humbly, he said, I'm the LeBron James of racial equity, because the Black community trusts me and I don't shame the white community. I'm just direct. I say, look, you want to do something about it? Let's do something. If you don't want to do something about it, that's okay. But Black Lives Matter isn't going away. And you can be on the leading edge of it, or you can be a laggard. It's up to you. And that's how he talks.
Yeah. So anyway, cool little connection. I wanted to go to, you mentioned the mentor that you had, the suicide expert, but I've also heard you talk about Larry King as a mentor and being part of his Breakfast Club. And so I throw that out there, and people are probably thinking to themselves, as I am, you're practicing psychiatry, UCLA, helping people with, their problems, specifically with suicide. And then I'm thinking, how do you become a person that, is having breakfast regularly with Larry King? Or just last Friday, Tim Ferriss's email has a hat tip to you. And, I hear you talking about being on stage with Daniel Kahneman, and I believe, Nelson Mandela. And I've just heard all of these things, and I'm wondering to myself, how does this, and I might have that wrong, but anyway, I'm wondering, how does this all happen? And particularly start with Larry King.
Well, I'll share something. I'm a founding member of the Newsweek Expert Forum. So they're foraying into the business thing the way Forbes and Inc. does, where you can write articles. And probably by the time you post this, my latest article at Newsweek will be out. And it's called the UX trifecta, user experience. And so I think one of the ways that I've discovered to be most compelling to open people's minds is three things. You want to share something that is counterintuitive, meaning they would say to themselves, I never would have thought of that. That's relevant to me. I never would have thought of that. It should be intuitively correct. That's the second step. I can use that. I can use that. That'll help me. So it's relevant to me. And then the third thing is it's doable by me. I'm going to act on it. So when you're trying to, have your marketing departments that when they put out any information, and marketing is what you put out that gives you the opportunity to make a sale. A lot of people confuse those, but marketing is what you put out in the world that attracts enough attention so that you have the opportunity to make a sale. And all marketing should trigger something that's counterintuitive. I never would have thought of that. Intuitively correct. This is relevant to me. And the third thing is I'm going to buy that. And so here's an interesting first impression with Larry King. So he had a breakfast club of quirky people for 21 years. And, people would come in from out of town and there was like 4 or 5 regulars and you'd take turns paying for it.
Was Cal Fussman one of those people?
Absolutely. Yeah. I love Cal.
Okay.
Yeah, he moved back to the East Coast. Cal's a great guy. Love Cal. You remind me to reach out to him. And so someone invited me, who was part of the group, said, I meet with Larry King. You want to come to breakfast? So here's what you call the UX trifecta. I think this is a cute story. So I remember there were 6 of us there, two tables side by side. So I'm diagonally far away from Larry, and he's engaged with someone in front of him, and they would banter really intensely. And this person who brought me said, "Oh, here's Mark." And, Larry didn't really talk to me because I was distant from him. And so this is how you make a good first impression. I said, "Larry," and they were getting up. I said, "Larry, you're pretty curious, aren't you?" He said, "I've been curious all my life." In Brooklyn, "I've been curious all my life."
Yes, sure.
I said, "Really?" He said, yeah. When I was a kid, I didn't care about eating ice cream. I want to know how you make it. I said, "Well, that's good." I said, "I have a suggestion for you." And he's kind of looking at me oddly, like, who is this guy? I don't even know this guy. I said, a couple of weeks ago, Sully Sullenberger was being interviewed by Lawrence O'Donnell, I think, the 11th, whatever the guy is, the last word with whatever his name is. And he was referring to Trump as incurious. And he was saying, and what Sully Sullenberger was saying is, I don't know if President Trump can learn because he's not curious. He's incurious. So Larry's looking at me and the table's looking at me. I said, "Here's an idea for you. You're going to go and print up 2 caps. You're going to have Sully Sullenberger on your show. You're going to print up 2 caps. And they're each going to say MACA, not MAGA. You're going to put one of the hats on and you're going to say to Sully, why don't we start a campaign? Make America curious again." And you're going to give him the cap and he'll be all over that in a heartbeat. And then the person Larry was bantering with looks at Larry, looks at me, looks at Larry, and he says, "Larry, do you know how brilliant that idea is?" And then Larry smiles at me. He said, "You can come to breakfast every day." So that's how you make a good first impression. But do you see how that's counterintuitive? I never would have thought of that. It's intuitively correct. Boy, I think that would work. And it was doable. He didn't do it because, he was caught up in something else. But that's what you want to do. If you're listening in, you're an entrepreneur, you want to be able to do that. Something I will mention, which you haven't mentioned, is for a year and a half, I've done a bunch of things. I did a one-man show playing Steve Jobs coming back from the dead. So I did. There's videos up on YouTube. So there's a turtleneck, the 501 jeans, the horn rim glasses. And the whole purpose of it was to tee up a formula that Steve Jobs discovered. And it's the secret formula that makes him and Elon Musk a visionary. And the formula is, you want to show people in your marketing something that triggers in them, wow, yes. Wow, yes. Sorry about the silence.
That's okay. That happens.
And here's an example. And so when I played him, I played him coming back to Apple in 1996 till 2007. And I said, when he discovered the graphical user interface at Xerox PARC, and there's a video, if you're listening in or viewing, look up National Geographic, Xerox PARC, Steve Jobs. You'll see a dramatization where he discovers the graphical user interface, the mouse, and you look at the expression on his face and you'll see he goes, wow, yes. The wow is he can't believe what he's seeing. He says, he looks at Wozniak, what do you think? And Wozniak says, once they go there, they're not going back. And then the yes is, they didn't know what to do with it at Xerox PARC. He went back to Apple and created the Macintosh. And he did the same thing with the announcement of the iPhone. It's a phone. It's an iPod. It's an internet connecting device.
Right.
And he says it several times, and he says, these are not three separate entities. I give you the iPhone. So he created in people the wow, yes. And Apple, every time they announce a new product, Elon Musk does that with Tesla. You want to be able to create in your market that experience. Wow, I can't believe what I'm seeing. This is too good to ignore. Yes, I see what I can do with this. Sold.
Yeah. What made you want to do that, Mark? What made you want to
do the one-man show?
Yeah, do the one-man show. Yeah.
Well, I've done, for years, I've intermittently done presentations to Vistage groups, YPO, EO, and I was doing a presentation to a group called Advanced. I forget it, but there's about 10 of them up and down California, and I was doing presentations on listening. And I'm a pretty good storyteller, and I remember the founder of it, Mimi Grant. She said, "You got pretty good ratings." After the first one, I was talking about listening, and she said, "You're going to come back and do one for one of the other groups." And I said, "Good, but I'm going to do a different topic." And she said, "But you did so well with the first one." I said, "I lucked out." I said, "Trust me on this." And she looked at me, and I don't lie. And so the next one, I talked about this wow, yes thing. And someone said, "You just figured out Steve Jobs." So then the third presentation, I explained how Steve Jobs went through it. And then the fourth presentation, I started channeling Steve Jobs And someone said to me in that group, because there were about 10 groups, you got to decide whether you want to give information or you want to give entertainment. And he looked at me, he said, and you know the one you want to give.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
After that, I just started presenting as Steve Jobs.
Got it.
And just like I could look at the world through Nancy's eyes, I learned to be able to look at the world through Steve Jobs' eyes.
It makes me wonder, listening to you, do you think that Elizabeth Holmes watched your video? She's the Theranos woman that, I don't know if you're familiar with her.
I'm not, it had a very short run, and there were small crowds.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just curious.
Hey everyone, if you like what I'm doing with this podcast and want to participate in more of the things I'm thinking about and exploring, subscribe to my newsletter today. It's super simple. Just go to mikemalatesta.com right now, put in your email, and you will get the very next issue. It's short, thoughtful, and designed to inspire, activate, and maximize the greatness in you.
So let's, we're kind of up against our time here, Mark. I'm wondering, I sort of talked about it at the very beginning. I don't think I can let you leave without asking you about how Superbad came to be, or at least parts of it came to be filmed at your home. How did that happen?
So we live in a part of Los Angeles called Brentwood.
And that's OJ lived in Brentwood, as I recall.
Well,
years ago.
I was part of the OJ trial. I worked with the prosecution.
I remember you talking about that.
Oh, that's a whole other show.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe we'll do that show.
In fact, we can do that because I do a talk about never be bullied again, and I talk about being confronted by F. Lee Bailey. That's a whole other story.
Oh, can we do that? Would you be willing to do something on that? Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah, if we want to do that. So sometimes the location people are looking for houses, and so one of my wife, she's a full-time mom and grandmom, and she's wonderful. I hit the lottery with her. But one of her little hobbies is, if someone wants to, use our house for a location, and so this movie company comes over with a guy named Judd Apatow, never heard of him, and Jonah Hill, and I was away working in the East Coast, and they used the location for 2 weeks, and I didn't know this, but if they use your house for 13 days, it's tax-free as a location. So that helped pay for a couple tuitions those 13 days. And I remember my wife was saying, asking one of not the main director, so what's the show about? And they said, I don't know. It's probably going to go straight to video.
Yeah, sure.
And so they filmed the final 10 or 15 minutes of Superbad in my home. And here's a silly, stupid story. So about a year and a half ago, I joined Clubhouse, the audio thing.
The audio app. Yeah.
And because, and you put up pictures. And so what I put up a picture of one of the Superbad characters named McLovin. And McLovin was this nerdy kid who finally has sex. And so my Clubhouse picture was a picture of McLovin sitting on our bed just after he'd had sex. And then I got all this pushback from Clubhouse. They say, Mark, you look like a child molester. You better get rid of that picture. So when you see something out of context, but it was funny, and they use that. And so that's the Superbad story.
Nice. Well, that goes to your, that first thing that you said, you say something or do something that's counterintuitive, or say something counterintuitive, right? So that picture was counterintuitive of you as a.
Mm-hmm. So here's a tip if you're in transition and you're trying to define what your unique value proposition is. There's a saying that people are more impressed by excellence than what you're excellent at. You don't have to like basketball, but you could still be impressed by Steph Curry. You don't have to like golf and still be formally impressed by Tiger Woods. So what I suggest to people who are trying to distill what their unique value proposition is to reach out to people you've worked with in the past 2-3 years, not before that, who you believe saw you as excellent. And excellent means you were consistently better than very good, and you consistently exceeded their expectations. So identify who those people are, and you reach out to them. And in the subject line of whatever the email or text is, I'd like to buy 15 minutes of your time. Now, these people, except the real, sort of a-holes, are going to say, you don't have to buy. What's this about? And what you say is, unless I was mistaken, it seemed to me that you felt that I was excellent because you told me that. And I just worked hard to help you. But I'm trying to drill down what it was that I was excellent about in your eyes. I'm trying to distill what that is, but I take your time seriously and I want to pay for it. And these people, are going to give you the 15 minutes or you pay them for it. But what will happen psychologically is they will share things that you did with them that they now remember. And when they're remembering it, they're re-experiencing how appreciative and grateful and wowed they were by you in the conversation. They'll relive it. And then what you say to them is, what would you call that besides, works hard? And what industry do you think most needs that? And it's just a matter of me getting in front of that industry or that company. And they'd be able to tell you what that is. But if you do this with enough people and you've been that respectful and willing to pay them for their time, I would say about a quarter of those people after that conversation with you are going to say, let me make a call. Because if you're excellent, they can reach out to someone they know in an industry. And one of the ways I make introductions to people, I make 2 introductions a day, is I'll reach out to people from my podcasts and say, as part of my relationship with you, is when I run into people that are truly excellent, I feel it's my responsibility to let you know that I know these people. And I'm not telling them that I'm hitting on you for them, but I just ran into someone who's the best oncologist, the best veterinarian, the best strategist, the best whatever. And here's a link. And if you want, I'll send you a link. And if you want an introduction, I'll introduce the 2 of you. So you're building incredible goodwill, and you develop a group of people that you deem to be excellent. So one of the things that we didn't talk about that I seem to be excellent is conflict resolution. Because what I've discovered is the majority of people avoid conflict in business unless they're a bully. Bullies cause conflict. They don't avoid it. But most other people put off firing someone, confronting someone. And so I'm one of the best known conflict mastery coaches. So I'm not just going to go in there and resolve the conflict. At my age, I'll say, well, we can do that, but I'm going to help you master any conflict you're facing, because you're not just avoiding conflict with your business partner, you're avoiding conflict with your brother or sister or such and such, and it's eating you up.
Right.
And let's work together so that you can confront any conflict. And so people are now introducing me to people who they know have a conflict. Is there a conflict you're avoiding? Yeah. Does it ever eat you up at night where you can't even sleep? Oh yeah, all the time. Why are you asking? Because I've run into someone who teaches people how to finally confront any conflict they have.
Right.
So do you follow how that works?
I do. In fact, as you were saying that, so I haven't done exactly that. What you suggested doing was, I think, more valuable than what I've done. I've done something similar. I call it Grateful for Your Thoughts. I've done this twice over 20 years, and I've reached out to that group, same sort of group that you're talking about. People who know me but don't rely on me. They're not looking at me for a check or something. And I asked them, what am I good at? Help me understand where I provide the most value. And I also asked them, and if there's areas where I do something that actually takes away from my value proposition, tell me that too. And it's been great. I collect the information back. Most people are very willing to help me with that. Some want to, talk to me. Some just want to email, but I collect all of that. And then I look at it introspectively and I say, okay, am I on the path that I want to be on? Am I making the difference I want to make? Or is there something getting in the way of that I can address, that I can't see myself, or I want to avoid and hope that other people don't see it, even though I recognize that it's there. That was really good.
I think that's wonderful. You can try either, but in terms of getting people's attention, if there's someone who thinks favorably towards you and you haven't been in touch with them, I think if you say, if you send them a message, hi, I'd like to buy 15 minutes of your time.
Yeah, I like your approach better. I'm just going to be clear about that. That's like a very compelling. No one asks to buy your time.
Yeah,
they just don't do it, right?
Yeah, right.
They ask to pick your brain, and people go, "Oh, jeez." But buy your time is way different.
Yeah, so you're respecting, and if they had a good experience with you, only the real, jerks are going to say, okay, yeah, my time is $10,000 an hour, so it's $2,500 for 15 minutes.
Right. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that, Mark. Dr. Goulston, thank you so much for being on my show. This has been a real joy getting to know you and getting the education that you provided as well. It was really interesting to sort of go back and forth on that. I said where to find you at the beginning. Is there anything you want to add here at the end so that people can hook up with you?
MarkGoulston.com is relatively up to date. LinkedIn, I'm keeping pretty much up to date.
Okay.
And I'm on Instagram. I don't do much on Facebook for some reason or other.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah, there's just only so much I can do. And my wake up call is available on nearly all podcast platforms.
Yeah,
and
listen to that, people.
And I'm going to be launching something, but I can't tell you what it is. But if you're going to have me back on the show, it might be launched by the time you have me back.
Okay. All right. So you leave us hanging. I like it. Perfect. Leave us wanting more. Okay, Mark, thank you so much.
You're welcome. And I'll leave with what the Tim Ferriss quote.
Yes.
Because that was a long tangent. So I saw that he liked quotes. And so you can reach him on Twitter.
Yeah.
And so I said, I saw that you like quotes. And here's my favorite quote of all time. And I collect a lot of them. And the quote I credit to a woman named Dr. Shani Duperon. And it said, forgiveness is accepting the apology you will never receive.
Mm-hmm.
So I sent it to him. And he's got a zillion followers. But I got a tweet back from him, saying this is very, very helpful. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, he made that his quote of the week, which means I'm sure that got through to him. I'm sure he thought to himself, this is counterintuitive. I never would have thought of that. This makes so much sense. I'm going to do it. I mean, I'd love to get on his show to see how he followed up on it because it obviously hit a nerve with him, but who knows?
Yeah, it's a wow. I'm going to use that.
That's right.
Yeah. All right, Mark. Well,
my friend.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to the show. And before you go, I just have 3 requests for you. 1, if you like what I'm doing, please consider subscribing or following the podcast on whatever podcast platform you prefer. If you're really into it, leave me a review, write something nice about me, give me 5 stars or whatever you feel is most appropriate. Number 2, I've got a book. It's called Owner Shift: How Getting Selfish Got Me Unstuck. It's an Amazon bestseller, and I'd love for you to read it or listen to it on Audible or wherever else, Barnes & Noble, Amazon. You can get it everywhere. If you're looking for inspiration that will help you unlock your greatness and potential, order or download it today so that you can have your very own copy. And if you get it, please let me know what you think. Number 3, my newsletter. I do a newsletter every Thursday, and I talk about things that are interesting to me or I give more information about the podcast and the podcast guests that I've had and the experiences that I've had with them. You can sign up for the podcast today at my website, which is my name, MikeMalatesta.com. You do that right now, put in your email address, and you'll get the very next issue. The newsletter is short, thoughtful, and designed to inspire, activate, and maximize the greatness in you.